But one of the things I wanted to say was, as Father Carney was speaking at the Mass this morning, I was thinking that there are different kinds of heroism in life. And a lot of us have heroes who are sort of larger than life. They're sports figures, they're military figures, they're science researchers, they're entertainers, but they're not us. And they're on a different level, and we admire them because they are on a different level. But in a very real sense, we don't relate very well to those people because they don't touch our hearts because they're sort of above and beyond us. But there's another kind of hero that we see in daily life, and Father Carney talked about her this morning, and we're celebrating her life here today, and that's Katie Bowles. And for many of us, we're not going to be great discoverers, but there are things that we can do in our lives that can make us heroes. We can choose to not surrender to the demons in our lives. We can say that we are not going to give in to the pressures in our lives. We're not going to surrender to pain. And we're not going to give up. And if you have those traits, those are distinctly human traits. No other animal species has the consciousness to make those kinds of choices, to refuse to give in to pain, to refuse to be negative. And so we're here celebrating someone who made the choice to be heroic. And that's Katie Bowles. And I just wanted to say that I hope that we all can treat her as a role model as we deal with the demons or the depressions or the bad times in our own lives. She's become a role model for each and every one of us. So in addition to saluting her for her heroism, I'd also think that we would be wise to thank God for the gift of giving us to someone like Katie, who can be a role model for each and every one of us. Thank you.
I'm Lucille Bonner. I'm Lucille Bonner. My voice went. And we've been neighbors to the Bowles forever. Their cul-de-sac, Kiowa, ends at my house on Rio Bravo. And when Katie was a teenager and she was trying to decide what she wanted to do with her life, she was considering law enforcement, and she went around with one of the police officers on her parole, and it was that officer arrested me or gave me a ticket for speeding, didn't give me a ticket, but stopped me for speeding up the truck route to Los Alamos, we call it the Hill. And Katie was with her. It was something that Katie said that was respectful to me, I think. I don't remember what it was, but she was showing respect, I know that. And the officer didn't give me a ticket, just gave me a warning. And I think it was then that I realized that I wasn't ever going to be perfect, but that God required that we be perfect to be in his kingdom. And so he provided Jesus, and I had to admit that I needed Jesus because I always tried to do what was right and was a compliant child, I guess. But when I realized I needed Jesus and received him as my Savior and Lord, he declared me perfect before God the Father. And I belonged to him a long time. But he's still transforming my life. I'm still learning because we never do get there. But it's his work in me, not me. Because what I realized was that in my own efforts, I never would earn God's favor. But now I know that when I die, I will go to heaven and to be with God because Jesus is my Lord and Savior. And I'm trusting that Katie also made that discovery.
Hello, my name is Carol Lonsdale. I've been a friend of Jeannie's since longer than I can remember. We met when she was working in Hawaii, and I was a new student there back in, I think it was 78, and met Tom as soon as, when Jeannie got together with Tom here. I'm not sure what date, but that was, yeah, it was a long time anyway. I just want to offer a very quick vignette about Katie. Due to circumstances, I didn't get to see her through much of her life, just now and then, so little snapshots. But the one that's in my mind, I thought I'd share with you. And I looked for a photograph of this, but I thought I had one, but I couldn't find it. But anyway, it's in my mind. And that is the time that my husband and I and my daughter, who was just a little bit older than Katie, traveled across from California, where we lived, to visit here in New Mexico, when Katie was, I don't know, 5 or 6, maybe up around that age. And I have this vision, just wanted to share with you, of the two girls bouncing and jumping on the bunk beds, which was not allowed. And I have this picture of Katie. I mean, you very generously allowed them to do it. And the joy in her face, her little face, and my daughter's. But, it's just there. And I just wanted to give that to you.
Thank you. One person I would like to really recognize here who made a tremendous difference in Katie's life and extended it by many years is Dr. Miguel Pupialis in the back. He is here with a number of his staff who, I have to say, treated Katie royally. And we've been to see doctors all over the country. I mean, we've been to Boston, Baltimore, Chicago, Cleveland, Phoenix, you name it. We've been there with Katie trying to find solutions. Dr. Pupialis is the only doctor I know of that I've met who can really encompass the full range of complexities of the medical issues that Katie had. No, I'm not. Here I am speaking and not using the mic. I'm sorry. I can project quite loudly if you would like me to. Something I learned in speech and debate in high school. So, from your mother. Yes, yeah, my mother was good at it too. Anyhow, the only reason Katie was able to survive so long is she had several doctors, 3 doctors in particular, who understood her, understood how brilliant she was. One of them, Dr. Romnick, who is a neurologist and a psychiatrist. Katie met with him all the time. An amazing guy. He was going to be here this afternoon, but his daughter has tested positive for COVID and is having some real troubles, so couldn't come. He used to refer to Katie as Dr. Bowles, because he told me, and Dr. Pupialis is good friends with Dr. Romnick, and he knows. Katie often could not sleep at night, and so when she wouldn't sleep, she would sit and read medical journals. And I don't mean, like Time magazine. I mean the journals that the doctors appoint, have published, in American Medical Association and so on, trying to understand what was going on with her. And there were a number of times when Katie went in to a doctor and said, doctor, I was thinking about this, and I have this problem, and, I was wondering if it would be related to, in some then medical term. And she wasn't saying, I think I have this. She was being very polite, but telling the doctor, you need to look at this. And 3 out of 4 times they would look at it and they say, my gosh, this is very unusual, which describes Katie in every which way. But you're right. And one of the things that amazed me about Dr. Pupialis is Katie would come in and say, well, I've been having, this symptom, this problem, and I'm not quite sure. And you say, well, I noticed your cuticles are doing this, and I noticed your eyelids are doing this, and so on, and then turn around and read you verbatim out of the medical dictionary what he just said. So I want to thank Dr. Pupialis. If you'd like to say something, and your staff is up here in the front, Deanna and the others, thank God for doctors who understand people and treat them as people and not as objects.
Thank you. My name is Miguel Pupialis, and I met Katie in 2010. She was 22 years old, and incredibly bright human being, wonderful woman. And I met her because of a serious motor vehicle accident. And it was severe enough that it cascaded to multiple then complications, medications that were not prescribed appropriately, problems with gastrointestinal problems. And subsequently, for the 12 years that I knew her, and I have dedicated most of my life for understanding pain, treating pain, managing pain. But the one thing I never understood because I couldn't experience was the suffering, the agony, the turmoil an individual goes through when they suffer with chronicity, with chronic pain, with a chronic illness. You can read almost anything you want, understand it, but to feel it, to be a human being and to agonize, and especially when you agonize at night by yourself, when you're all by yourself in this lonely place where the demons come in. And that was Katie living 12 years nonstop with this agony, with these demons. But every single time, the strength of her soul was such that she would come with hope. But then another disease came in, something that all of a sudden you say, how does a human being manage all of this? From one that is bad enough to one that's worse, and then to one that's worse. And then all of a sudden, you begin to look at her and say, why don't individuals pay attention? Why don't physicians pay attention? One of the things I learned, and I'm so blessed to have known Katie, is the fact that I have become more believing in what my patients tell me. At times, we no longer believe the patient because we look at a computer. We sit there because the computer is supposed to tell us everything. It's supposed to give us the diagnosis. But we're not a simple program, an app. We're such complexity. And Katie, since I knew her in 2010, and I understood pain, I understood disease, I treated, but the one thing, as I mentioned before, I never suffered, never agonized. Until 2015, I have prostate cancer. I developed my own complications. I become now a patient that also doctors don't believe in certain disease processes. I'm traveling all over the country, Washington State, New York. I'm having to do my own diagnosis. And I always thought of Katie and said, she is navigating this system without a degree. She's navigating this system just with her pure intellect and desire to feel better, to be whole again. And people just wouldn't believe her. And that's what I think that Tom's brother said, the heroes in us, right? This is a true hero who really is unknown to anyone that's not a celebrity, is not a basketball hero, but it's a true hero. And she touched my life because of that. And as I was coming here, I wanted to see if there is a passage or something that allows us to think. We always say that there is a better place, that she's in a better place. And I think that Peter said it very well in 5:10. And I don't want to mess it up, so I copied it, and it says, after you have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself perfect, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. I think she's established. I think she's whole now. I think she is who she was supposed to be. And she touched a lot of individuals. She certainly touched me. She's made me a better person, an understanding physician, a compassionate physician, and I will miss her.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who has some memories?
I'm kind of ready. I've been standing here.
Okay. This is my cousin Christopher Bell.
Hi, I'm Chris Bell, Tommy's cousin, in a sense, Tommy and Patrick's brother, because we were thick as thieves and haven't ever stopped. And I'd like to build on what Patrick started with, that Katie and how special she was. But no one's that special by themselves. They're special because they have a village who supports them. They have all of you who've supported Katie or Jeannie or Tom. You've supported each other, and it is this community, both gathered in on Zoom, that are the beloved community of the Holy Family that has supported Jeannie and her mom, Marty, Tommy, his mom, Mary, which was my father's sister, and then Joe. And you guys don't know so much, but Joe was incredibly long-suffering. And I think Katie got a lot of that Joe power. Never to quit, never to complain. Joe just kept right on moving. And Mary was a force unto herself that has yet to be fully appreciated, though we all love her dearly. So I would just like to thank Thomas, who was so, is so, will be so loyal, persevering in all ways, and Mother Jeannie. So I think that we should recognize how many people here we celebrate. We celebrate all of you.
Thank you, Chris. Marilyn?
Hello, I'm Marilyn Smith. I had the privilege of sharing fourth grade with Katie, and I had the honor of being her fourth grade teacher. She was a contemplative soul. However, she did have a twinkle in her eye. And when she thought it was appropriate or relevant, she would share her thoughts. And when I was silly or goofy in class, I was rewarded with Katie's smile and laugh. And yes, Mom and Dad, she was a well-behaved student, and she focused on her assignments, and she listened in class, and she completed her assignments on time. So she made you proud. And I just wanted to say, too, that she was very kind and gentle, and I felt that it was a great honor to have her in my class. And she seemed to like to sit near the window, and I think she liked to be there because she liked nature. And and as you can see today, Mother Nature has graced us with a beautiful day because we're honoring Katie.
My name is Christine Campbell, and I am Patrick Bowles' wife. Patrick is Tom's brother, and better brother. Well, this is where we get into who's better. I will say today that I recognize Patrick as my better half today, because he was able to speak as so eloquently, and the rest of you too who came up here without notes. I have to have my notes, or I won't be able to say what I want to say today. But I wanted to just reflect a bit on Katie and the sense of Katie as a gift. St. Ambrose, the 4th century bishop of Milan, biblical critic and doctor of the church, stood up to give a eulogy of his brother who he had lost. He was very, very close to this brother. And he stood up and he said that we human beings tend to see our family and friends as ours, as our possessions, if you will. And when the Creator or the universe, whatever you prefer, somehow robs us of these people, we are angry and have difficulty. We have difficulty getting through and understanding what has happened. Because again, we feel they are rightly ours. And he stepped back and he said, you know, these people, these friends and family are not ours. They are gifts. They are gifts from, again, in his perspective, the Creator. You can say the universe, depending on how Zen you are. But if we look at them as gifts, gifts that come into our lives for a period of time, and we don't know how long, I think that can help us a bit to grapple with the grief, the confusion that we feel when these things happen. Today we ponder the gift that was Katie. She, a unique, intelligent part of the human race, was a creation who had a plan, and you've heard about it today, a plan to use her sufferings to help others by becoming a medical doctor. She had a dream, and she was moving toward that dream when she was somehow taken by the Creator of the universe. We will never know why this has happened, why she was taken before she could realize her dream. What some of us do believe is that she's no longer suffering, and this is a consolation to us. And some of us believe she is part of the communion of saints that we have read and heard about. She is on another plane of existence, helping others in a mystical, mysterious way we can only imagine. May we remember Katie as what she was, a gift in our lives. And we will remember her in her legacy because Tom and Jeannie are setting up this foundation to give these scholarships to aspiring medical students who do have a dream. They have the same dream as Katie. So in this sense, she is going to be forever with us, sharing in this dream.
You know, my wife is an incredibly smart woman. I've learned that many, many times over the years in many different ways. But one of the things that she says, always says, which strikes straight to my heart, there is a reason for everything. Maybe we don't understand it now. Sometimes things happen in your life, and a few years later you went, oh my gosh, you know, that led to this, and now this ended up in being something wonderful or better. You know, I have no idea why the Lord took her at age 33. Maybe he just thought he wanted a friend who was 33 years old. But there's a reason for it. And, you know, as Christine said, and Patrick, you know, her legacy is that she suffered a lot, but she rose above it. And I can't tell you how many times I was with her when she got really depressed. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to be the end of it. And she would turn around and say something like, why don't we go do this? Because we haven't tried that in a long time and maybe it will help. And it just continually blew me away. So the fact you are all here, you know, remembering Katie, thinking of her, I loved your homily, thank you. And I know you put untold hours into it. You probably didn't sleep for the last few weeks putting that together. It was wonderful.
Whiskey helps.
Irish whiskey. Has to be Irish whiskey, right?
It is.
Okay. You know, it's going to carry on. And one of Katie's best friend. So when we had the last viewing of Katie, A week after she passed away, Father John came to the mortuary, and Jeannie and I were there, and Patrick and Christine, my brother and his wife, flew in. And Jeannie's friend, Katie's friend, Caroline, came in. They were at Montana Academy together for 3 years. They were the best friends imaginable. And they would spend, in the last year, I would hear her talking, and they would be on the phone for 3 or 4 or 5 hours at a time, just talking about everything. She's an emergency room nurse. She's not here today because she's taking her exam to become a HEAL-EVAC paramedic, and they only do that once a year, and she couldn't miss it. We were trying to get her on Zoom. She was trying to send a message. That didn't happen, but what she would say to you is, Katie was very fair. She was honest. She was caring. She worked hard. She tried to do good. And if Carolyn were here, she could express that much more eloquently. She sent a wonderful note to Father Carney about that. So one of the things that they talked about was Katie told Caroline, her friend who's in the emergency room, she said, emergency rooms, doctors, they don't treat people like people. They just, it's a case, as Father John was saying, you come in, you got to take this test, that test, you sign off on it, you're out the door. They don't have time to think about people. And Katie kept telling Caroline, the doctors and the nurses are not doing what they should do, which is to be compassionate, to listen, to understand, and try and figure out what they could do to help. And she said, no, that's wrong. Well, then she started looking around her in the emergency room and at the doctors and in the hospital, and she said, oh my gosh, Katie, you're right. So she made that difference to Caroline. Caroline's going to continue that on. She's talking to the other nurses and to the doctors saying, maybe we should try things a different way. And it all comes down to being human in the end. So Katie's legacy is going to carry on through what Caroline is spreading through the medical community. My wife and I hope to do that by paying tuition for a student every year who's who wants to treat really complicated, hard cases, because, 2/3 of the doctors we would go to would say, I don't know what to do. You got like 5 different symptoms. You're on 14 different medications. I don't know what to do. So we're trying to ingrain that and follow on so that Katie's legacy lives on. And I think she's up in heaven looking down on us and saying, carry on. That's about as much as I can say, but if anybody else has something you want to say, now's your chance. They're going to start, we're going to start closing down things here, and our family, and among whom we count a number of friends, the Teasdales, Joe and Barb, some others. To us, they're family. So the family's going to gather, and we're going to continue to celebrate Katie this evening. But if anybody else has something you want to offer, some insight, memory, now's your chance forever. Okay, Sarah.
Okay, I may not be able to do this, but we've been friends with Tom and Jeannie for years, and I had the privilege, of having Katie over to our house sometimes for a week at a time, sometimes for a day or two. And we have this huge family. Bill and I have 8 kids, and one time they all came home for Christmas, all but 2 of them, and their families. And so it was Christmas Day, and Katie called, and she agreed to come over. So I have a photograph of all these kids in their pajamas out on the deck, and Katie right in the front, on one knee, and it was just a beautiful picture, and I will have that forever. And when Katie came over to our house, she had lots of restrictions. She couldn't eat, she couldn't eat gluten. Yeah, right. And so I would call her and say, okay, Katie, tell me what to get for you. And she would say, don't worry about it. I'll get it all. So then I called Jeannie and I'd say, okay, Jeannie, what can't she eat? And Jeannie would tell me, and I would go down and get a few things. And Katie'd come in with a whole grocery sack full of stuff, that half of which was always left at my house, that none of us could eat. She was really heroic, and I think that's the word that I've heard mostly here. That kid had a capacity for suffering without complaining. She would tell you about the long list of stuff that was wrong with her. And she would tell you about the research that she was looking at and the doctors that she talked to that would actually listen to her. But she wouldn't complain. You wouldn't hear her whine about it. And we have a daughter that also has chronic pain and lots of stuff wrong with her. And I will underscore what Tom said. Emergency room doctors don't listen. Nurses in hospitals don't listen. These kids suffer more in the hospital than they do out on their own. Anyway, I love Katie. And to answer the question of the lady that said she hoped that she had Jesus as her personal savior, I can attest to that fact that she does. She went to a non-Catholic Christian school and got saved and came home and browbeat her parents for about 2 weeks until Tom finally convinced her that he really was a believer in Jesus, even though he was Catholic. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Well, that's good to know.
Thank you. Anybody else want to join into the the morass here? No. I know a lot of people are hesitant to stand up and talk. I've never been one of those people, so. Although I have to say, when I grew up, I didn't say, sort of like Mozart, I didn't say a word for, the first 20 years of my life. I mean, he didn't speak until he was, 5, And then they asked him why he didn't speak. He said, well, I didn't have anything to say. Well, for better or worse, I always have a lot to say. So I'll just end this. I see so many friends here who have been friends for decades. Los Alamos has been a wonderful place because people here care. My family has been so incredible. And when I say my family, you need to understand what that means. It's rather overwhelming. I think on my Aunt Catherine, so my father was the youngest of 8 kids. My Aunt Catherine was the oldest. I think it was on her 90th birthday. They had a party out in Maryland at her farm. And Katie and I and Jeannie went, and there were 92 people there. And Katie said, you mean I'm related to everybody here? And we said, yeah, these are all your cousins. I mean, some of them are second, third, whatever, but our family is very large, very caring. They're also wild and a lot of fun. There are stories I could tell you that would probably get us thrown in jail for parading down streets in the middle of the night drunk, but it's all in the Irish tradition of, go out and have a good time and have a drink, and carry on, so.
We can go to confession.
Yes, that's right. The only hard part about confession is, Father, forgive me my sins, but then it's really hard to say I'll never sin again. Anyway, there are a lot of people here. I tried to connect them on Zoom. You know, you think with modern technology, and I tell people say, well, what do you do? Well, I'm a nuclear physicist. Like, oh my God, you know, it's like, you know everything. No, I know about that much of everything. But I couldn't get them on. Carolyn was one. I have a lot of cousins in Maryland and Florida who could not come here, who really wanted to participate. And so the Mass we had was streamed so they can go back and watch the Mass and so on. We're taping here the comments about Katie so people can join in, you know. And I mean, it's really a great thing about modern life that you don't have to physically be there. Although I have to say, one of the things I've learned, so I run a nonprofit which is looking at clean energy and how do we attract companies to move to New Mexico. Most of you probably don't know, New Mexico has the lowest cost of renewable energy of anywhere in the United States. That's why Facebook came here and invested $1 billion and why they're investing another $6.6 billion in Albuquerque. They want clean energy. I can tell you some funny stories about the people at the ski valley who wanted to make snow at night, and you know, the utility said, you know, the sun doesn't shine at night, you know. Well, you know, they actually had figured that out, but anyhow. There's some things that you wouldn't think of. We have got some great opportunities here in New Mexico. Los Alamos is blessed in many ways. And I think we have some opportunities. Katie pointed out some of the things in the medical profession, but there's other areas where we can you know, help the country also, I think, and not just the country, but the world, because the world is a very crazy place these days. And the fact that you're here means the world to us, to me and Jeannie. I don't know where Jeannie is, somewhere in the back, because she doesn't stand up and speak, hiding out over there. I just want to thank you all for coming, and I want to especially thank Father Carney, who took on the monumental task of trying to condense, because I think you got input from more than a dozen of my relatives, some of whom are quite verbose. Yeah, well, it's, you know, my mother's side is Irish, my father's side is all English, but, you know, I still like black and tan, though, so. So thank you, because this is, today for us is a day of transition, a day of moving on to peace. It's been really, really hard dealing with Katie's loss. I mean, it was a total shock. I think most of you know, Katie and I mean, Katie, I talked to her on a Saturday. She said she was doing fine, except her seizures had started again. Sunday, we couldn't reach her. Monday, we went down and found her dead in her chair. And that was a terrible shock. And we're still reeling from that, and will be for a long time. But thinking about the support and friendship here, so I spent a lot of my life, you know, working on science and working, you know, 80, 90-hour weeks, you know, at the lab and stuff. And after 72 years and, you know, sort of finally figuring out, well, in the last 8 years with Katie, I just told people, I can't do this anymore. I have to go see Katie. I mean, family has to come first. And science is wonderful, and it can progress and do lots of things, but people are what's important in life, and it's taken me almost all my life to figure that out. And the fact that you're all here means you all have figured it out, and I really, really appreciate that. And on behalf of myself and Jeannie, thank you for sharing our day with Katie. Thank you.